second. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Politics and Prose. My name is Grant. I'm a bookseller here where we host in-store events, trips, and classes. Before we get started today, I'd like to remind everyone to please silence your cell phones as to disrupt the event. When we get time for the Q&A portion, we have a mic set up by this right pillar. Please speak clearly into the mic. It is being live streamed tonight. Tonight, I'm very excited to welcome Ed Park, celebrating the release of his new book, An Oral History of Atlantis. Ed Park is the author of the novel Same Bed, Different Dreams, which was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize, won the Los Angeles Times Book Prize for Fiction, a finalist for the PEN Hemingway Award, among others. His short fiction has appeared in The New Yorker, McSweeney's, Vice, Harvard Review, and other periodicals and anthologies. And he writes regularly for the New York Review of Books, Harper's, The Atlantic, Book Forum, and elsewhere. Ed was the founding editor of The Believer and the former literary editor of the Voice Literary Supplement, and he has also worked in publishing. Personally speaking, Same Bed, Different Dreams is one of my all-time favorite books. It's a creative, trippy, and fun ride, unlike anything I've ever read before. I highly recommend it to everyone. His new book, An Oral History of Atlantis, in his new collection, An Oral History of Atlantis, characters question the fleetingness of youth and art, reckon with the consequences of the everyday, and find solace in the absurd, the beautiful, and the sublime. Throughout, Park deploys his trademark wit to create a world both strikingly recognizable and delightfully other. Park will be in conversation with Angie Kim, the New York Times bestselling author of Happiness Falls, a Good Morning America and Barnes & Noble Book Club pick, Virginia Literary Award winner, and Oprah's Daily's #1 novel of 2023. Her debut, Miracle Creek, was an Edgar winner and one of Time's 100 best mysteries and thrillers of all time. A Korean immigrant who moved to Baltimore in middle school, Kim attended Stanford University and Harvard Law School, where she was an editor of the Harvard Law Review. Please join me in giving the warmest welcome to Ed Park and Angie Kim.
Yes. Yeah, you go over there. And should I read a little first?
Sit first. Sit first.
Got too excited.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
I'm so excited to be here with you.
Thank you so much for doing this, Angie.
I'm so excited. Okay, so I am a super fan of Ed Park, and I started recommending to everyone who would listen that they should read Same Bed, Different Dreams,
Thank
as I
you.
think you know, because I kept on tagging you on everything, starting in 2022, because I'm lucky enough to have the same publishing team as you do. And so I got to read that super early. And also as a Korean American, I think I am just so very, very proud of your novel winning the LA Times Book Prize, as well as being a finalist for the Pulitzer. And, it's not like, yeah, right? We have to celebrate it.
Thank you, everyone.
We already kind of raised a little toast to it earlier today, but I'm just so, so proud of that. And so I feel the need to brag about this book a little bit before you read. So this is your first story collection, and there have been rave reviews everywhere. The New York Times called it these little stories, the capsules of wit. The Chicago Review of Books said it's always witty, sometimes surreal, frequently diving beneath mundane surfaces to mysterious and mesmerizing depths. It showcases a master of the short story form, which I have to agree. And Hamilton Kane in the LA Times said that you are our generation's captain of the insurgency against realism.
Oh my
Did
goodness.
You know that? Creating your own brand of Dada. So there have been comparisons to Kurt Vonnegut, James Joyce, everything. Okay, so I'm just very, very proud of you. It's almost like I'm like your sister, which is not really possible.
My Nuna.
But hey. Okay,
Thank you, Angie.
16 stories that span 25 years in the making. The first published story, which I think you're going to read for us, is from a magazine that doesn't exist anymore to the latest a few years ago in the New Yorker. And a lot of them you did for readings, which is why I really would love for you to read for us.
I will do that now.
Okay.
Thank you, Angie.
Yay.
One of the stories, oh wait, this works too?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the stories, the title story is called An Oral History of Atlantis, and that was one of the earliest stories I wrote. And I wrote that one for a reading in New York, for a venue that's no longer around, for a literary journal that's no longer around. So, the fact that oral history is in the title, like I knew I was going to be reading it out loud, and it sort of became, even like years ago, before I knew I was going to put a collection together, I always thought that would be a good title for a collection because many of these stories have been written initially for reading aloud to people who, like many of you, don't know who I am. And this is my very first published story, and it's the first story in the collection. It's called A Note to My Translator. Dear E, thank you for your letter. We are doing well here, relaxing as best we can. But a few of your queries about the ongoing translation of Mexican fruitcake, as you insist on rendering the title, disturb me profoundly. Time prevents me from undertaking my own Englishing of the thing, and since you had been recommended by a once trusted friend, I agreed to have you do the deed. I understand that French is an obscure and obsolete tongue, but we must have something like standards, yes? To go along with some of your suggestions, not to mention your outright brazen, unnoted blunders, would be akin to an automobile manufacturer issuing cars with only one tire and no brakes to speak of. To wit, page 1. The novel begins with a hailing of the muse and a quick history of man's moral awakening, mastery of his surroundings, and subsequent fall from grace, in my version. In your version, a man named Mr. Henry enters a flat in London and discovers that his wife is taking stomach medication. You go on to say that it's raining outside and that an oblong, Quaker youth is on a, quote, hickey spree. I respectfully suggest you put aside whatever hallucinogens you might be keeping on your nightstand and concentrate on the text I have provided you with. Page 2. Why knickers? Wherefore fugitive uranium? Why not call a spade, or as the case may be, a rubbery bathtub ornament? Page 7. Who is Solomon Everready? What is he doing in my book? Page 8. You asked in your letter what sort of chess pieces I had in mind when I wrote this scene. Were they carved of wood, you asked, or ivory, or were they simply molded from plastic? I cannot answer this question for you, E, since there are no chess sets and hence no chess pieces in the meticulously researched milieu of my novel. That milieu being the incredibly serious, hands pressed in a gesture of prayer, inner world of a man who sits alone and dundrearied off the coast of Madagascar. To add insult to injury, you hint that the novel might be strengthened if you, my translator, quietly added some minor details, such as half a page or so, kindly submitted for my inspection, in which you identify the chess pieces one by one, explaining how the tall one that bears the likeness of General Grant is the king of the Union side, how the 8 men with bugles are pawns, etc. Even if I were to do the unthinkable and allow you to mention a chess set resting on my delicate open-leafed end table, or as you have it, dog, why in God's name would you make it a Civil War chess set? And why are the pieces arranged so that when viewed sideways, they spell the word golf nut? Page 8, a little lower down. The doctrine of transubstantiation has nothing to do with pinball. Page 9, Solomon Everready reappears, this time smoking cut-grade reefer and imitating a trout. Explain this to me. Explain also the presence of scuba gear that, quote, reeks of melon. Page 10. Only 10 pages into my novel, and already all seems lost. I no longer recognize characters, points of plot, dialogue. I frankly have no idea what the words before me mean. Here you present a heated argument between two nuns, and are they truly robot nuns? Both of whom speak some amalgam of Cantonese and the international Morse code. Can you help me, please? So ends my criticism of the first chapter of your version of my novel. I have neglected, for brevity's sake, to note all the boners that litter every page of your rendition, solecisms that would be hilarious were not the matter at hand of such obvious importance. I am an unknown commodity in America. This is the book that will either build my stateside reputation or consign me evermore to the coldest remainder bin at the local price club. The minute I receive your letter indicating that you were pulling my leg, as they say, I will laugh and benignly destroy my letter to my American publisher, in which I go into excruciating detail about my proficiency in the deadly Brazilian martial art known as capoeira and the stylish havoc I've been known to wreak. Until then, I am Hans de Crap. Thank you. Thank you.
Hans de Crap.
That's me.
Oh,
That's my alter ego.
yeah. The Belgian alter
The
ego,
Belgian
right?
alter
who
ego, that's
makes
right.
a repeat appearance a little later in the book too.
Yes.
Although, is it the same person? Because here he's a novelist.
Yeah.
There he's an
It's
essayist,
a bit, I
and
wanted them to connect.
you
and
did
you can kind of like, yeah,
okay, and then have people wonder like I do.
wonder a little bit.
Yeah. And do you have an answer?
I'll let you in on a secret,
Okay.
which is not to get too complicated. So his name is Hans de Crap, and de Crap is my name backwards. And so that was like something.
Oh my God!
I always grew up knowing that was my name backwards, and then
I love that.
in my 20s, I
You
put him
have
in a
so
story.
many things of names
This
spelled
exclusive
backwards.
content here.
I really like that.
Thank you,
I
Angie.
haven't heard that. Like I haven't read that in any of the interviews or anything. I feel privileged.
This is
Okay, so
that wasn't a spoiler, by the way.
no. Okay, so I want to talk to you about the origin story for this
Sure.
collection. I mean, obviously, all the stories have their own origin stories, but this collection, why now? I understand from you that the contract under which it was written is like a dozen years
Give
old.
us some stories. Yeah.
Yes, and why these stories, and why in this order, like all of that sort of stuff. Like, what are these stories about to you?
These stories are about, not to get too nostalgic, but they were written over about 25 years, right? So that was I wrote that actually in 97. It was published in 98. And the most recent one, I think, came out maybe end of 2023. But as I mentioned before, like a lot of these were written for readings, but they often were not published. Some of them were published like immediately. Others were published years later.
Right.
So it kind of became this thing where I wasn't just like, here are a bunch of stories, let's throw them in. I felt like these stories all had something to do with time and with memory, both in the content, but also like their period of composition. So one of the stories in here is called The Air as Air, which I think the first glimmerings of was like 2011. Like I wrote like half of it. I read it somewhere. People loved it. I was like, great, but I didn't know how it would end. So it took another couple years to like write the ending. And then it didn't get published till also 2023.
And
so
that was in McSweeney's.
That
right?
was in McSweeney's.
Yeah.
And I actually helped found the magazine The Believer, which McSweeney's publishes, but I've never been published by McSweeney's before. So I was like, finally, after 20 years of like kind of being connected. But Yeah. So, and then often technology is part of it, and the way we use, not so much in that story, which is very kind of like um, maybe a satire of like a high literary
Yeah.
personality. Like you can imagine me in my 20s, like thinking someday I'll be like that guy, you
Yeah.
know. But a lot of the other stories deal with how we almost unconsciously we're always using technology
Yeah.
to do stuff, to get somewhere, to like interact with each other.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many linkages between these
Yeah.
stories. I mean, I know you call it a story collection, but for me, because of so many of the characters that, sort of appear in multiple
Yeah.
stories, there are so many motifs that are, similar. You definitely clearly have like the obsessions, the whack-a-mole thing
Right.
that like David Mitchell talked about, where you are just obsessed with something. And I can see that. And definitely, the past and nostalgia
Yeah.
and sort of 90s era, like internet culture
Right.
is a huge part. But I do feel like the thing that really, like, for me, brings all of them together is humor. And it's the humor to me, because I have to ask you about this because to me, it's one of the vastly underrated and so hard to do
Mm.
elements of fiction, and you do it so well. You did it
Thank you.
so well in both your previous novels and in all of these. But what I think I love about seeing the humor in these short stories is that there's such different types of humor
Uh-huh.
that are juxtaposed. So you have some things that are kind of like laugh out loud. There's some that are some like types of humor that are just like cringy, like awkward, like,
Right.
oh, I
Right.
can't believe. And then there are some like that are very witty and sophisticated,
Mhm.
and then some that are like very teenage boy, like,
Yeah.
come on, roll your eyes, like,
Right.
and they're often side by side.
Yeah.
So like I think I want to ask you, like, how do you do that? Is this something that you try to do
I do. I
intentionally?
do.
And like, but are you the kind of person that like your kids and your family and your friends go like, "Oh, Ed, he is so funny."
I don't think they think I'm that funny.
Okay, so how do you do like how is it that okay, cuz I have
I
to
did a reading.
I have to kind of
Yeah.
like confess that when
Okay.
we've met in the past,
Yeah.
I haven't like said, "Oh, Ed is really
What a
funny." So
riot.
I think that's one of the things that made me want to ask
I have
you.
to preserve my humor for the page. It's
Really? Is
very,
that what it is?
yeah.
Okay, all right.
Although that got a laugh. So I did a reading from Same Bed when the paperback came out, and my teenage son was in the audience, and he very like cheekily like had a question. He's like, "Dad, you aren't that funny in real life."
He
So I was
said,
very surprised to in front
"Really?"
of everybody. So trolling me a bit.
Did he read the whole thing?
He did read. He's actually probably my
Wow.
most. I mean, you know,
Out of your two kids?
yeah. Well, he's a very thorough reader. He's read all my books and had some. He actually had some very cool insights about Same Bed, like a connection that maybe unconsciously I meant, but I didn't actually know. And then
Really?
it totally made sense.
Wow.
But I do feel so. My first novel, Personal Days, was, if I were to describe it to someone, it's like an office comedy, maybe a
Yeah.
dark office comedy.
Yeah.
There's some dark stuff, but it's like from the first page, I just wanted to hook the reader. Like I
Right.
wanted them to like they don't necessarily know who I am. I just want them to go on page one, and
Yeah.
if they laugh, they smile,
Yeah.
maybe they'll they'll buy the book. They'll want to read it. Um, Same Bed was a bit different, and it's a much longer and I would say
Yeah.
more ambitious book, but there is that kind of teenage humor,
Yeah.
but I try to mix it sometimes. So I don't know if I can say this is a bookstore, right?
Yeah.
But like
What?
the New York Review of Books, which is
Yeah. Yeah.
a esteemed publication that I often write for. I just got into my head that somebody should wear a T-shirt with the same lettering that said the New York Review of Boobs. It's very juvenile. I have a woman wearing it, so maybe it makes it okay. Proust's Remembrance of Things Past.
Yeah.
I have I think it's a. Crap, this is bad form to correct myself. There's like I think there's an erotic poet who is who's written a book called Remembrance of Thongs Past. So just like I kind of collect those things
Yes.
and just put them on
I
the
feel like
page.
you have a lot of those things with
I
names.
could go on, yeah.
With names in particular, because so many of your names are like that, and then also like a lot of your jokes about names. Like there is a story where there are 17, 18 Tinas.
Yeah, all named
that
Tina.
are all together,
Yeah.
which makes for a lot of fun.
Yeah.
If a bit of confusion
Right.
for everyone involved.
Yeah, and there was there's a Tina in Same Bed Different Dreams, and there was a Tina in another story here where but there was also another Tina where I was like, could she
be the same
one of
Tina
the same Tinas? Island? And I was like,
it has to be.
Well, there was one that I said could not, like chronologically it could not happen. So I changed her name.
Okay.
But anyway, but I like this idea of, everybody having the same name, and so they would have to identify each other, they would have to be like, oh, that's French manicure Tina, or that's troll hair Tina.
Exactly. But I find that really funny that you're not like a particularly funny person in real life. You know what I mean? Okay, so but on humor, just one other thing, which is when I was reading like some of your flash pieces from here that are very, very funny, like Wife on Ambien and Slide to Unlock, which maybe some of you guys have read because they've been in the New Yorker. I really felt like, okay, these could be like, one of those McSweeney's, Internet Tendencies, like types of, humor pieces, except that I feel like there is something about the ending and the sort of turn that you have that, often in these humor pieces that are like lists or whatever, you'll have like, you will have some kind of escalation with respect to the last thing.
Right.
But with yours, it's not an escalation as much as a total turn, almost like a twist. But not a plot twist. It's more of a mood and atmosphere and sort of POV kind of twist. Can you talk a little bit about your endings and how you achieve that?
Yeah, it's like an emotional twist.
Yes,
and
it's an emotional twist.
I'm very conscious of that. And a lot of that is the wording. I mean, and I'll backtrack just to say, I actually have published 2 humor pieces on the McSweeney's website.
Oh, you have?
One was called with a friend. It was called. Wait, what was it called? One was called.
Because the titles are everything in those pieces.
One was like Some Other Emails from the Susan Sontag Archive.
Oh, okay.
It was pegged to like when Susan Sontag's archives were, and everybody was looking at her emails. And the other was, I feel like I'm watching The Bear 1988 versus The Bear, the TV show about the restaurant.
Right.
Do people remember the Bear
movie?
movie?
I don't remember the Bear,
like a nature movie with
1998.
bears, and they started eating magic mushrooms and stuff. It's like very bizarre.
No, I don't.
But those were just like humor, escalate the humor. And with a couple of the stories in here, especially like Wife on Ambien and a couple of the others, it's like, it is sort of that idea of like building the humor, right? Funny, sort of funny concept, and then just try to make each one a little bit funnier, right? And then at a certain point, like you can't go any higher, and then the real like sadness comes in, or something like the Wife on Ambien. I mean, this isn't really a spoiler, but like there's a sudden turn in terms of like how the reader can now understand the rest of the story, everything that came before.
And that's what I mean by the plot twist. It's like that kind of Sixth Sense kind of, like it makes you see everything through a different lens that is no longer just like, haha, and is just being juvenile or whatever. No, there's actually like gravitas and...
I think there's a way, I'm not a poet, but I think there's a way of maybe understanding some poems that way, where it's sort of like, this line's good, beautiful thing here, these lines are pretty good.
But you need that emotional turn.
Yeah, and then at the end, like sometimes it's like the last sentence, the last line of a poem that really like brings it home, like that's what you'll remember. like a couple months ago, I was like, it's a long story, but I was like kind of weirdly sick, and I couldn't do anything. I was in a different city, and all I could think of was I'll memorize a poem. I'll memorize a poem, and so I memorized the Second Coming, Yeats's Second Coming,
Okay.
and that last line. I mean, every line is like a banger, like
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
so good. But then that last line, like it's still like even thinking about it. What rough beast, its hour come round
Yeah.
at last, slouches toward Bethlehem to be born, and suddenly the whole poem like is like lit up, right?
Yeah.
And I try to do that. I feel like it's tough to do that with a novel, especially if you're going a couple hundred pages.
Yes.
But like a story gives you enough, you have enough room to build out character and
Yeah.
have a certain tone in the language, that it's almost like more like a poem, because then you can do something at the end that will kind of
Well,
retroactively go to the beginning.
yeah, actually, I have this somewhere. I don't remember where I have it in my notes. I have so many questions for you. But one of the I read this first, because when I first read it, I didn't have the hard copy or even the galleys. I just had the electronic copy, and because my team was nice to me and they know that I'm a fan, so they sent it to me when it was like still in Word or something, pre-copy edit, and so I had read the whole book before I saw like all of the praise and everything, but this one from Sarah Manguso really, I actually wanted to ask you about it because she calls it a screwball science fiction prose poetry of, quote, maximum lexical density. And I had, and the maximum lexical density is a line from one of Ed's stories. I don't remember which one. You probably do. Do you remember which one? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But I had like highlighted that.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, that's what this is.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking that especially your shorter pieces, the flash pieces, were like prose poems.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you about the compression that is required in this. After you wrote, the last novel that you wrote was what, 600 pages? 500? 500?
Yeah.
And the longest, the longest piece here is like 20 pages, the Machine City one.
Right.
And I just wanted to, like, how do you achieve that kind of compression, and what kind of sort of discipline and how many revisions does that take? Like, is that the kind of thing, like, are you going for maximum compression?
Yeah.
And what does that do to the story?
It's interesting. Like some of the stories, I mean, it's probably the two that were in the New Yorker, which are probably the best known. So Wife on Ambien and Slide to Unlock. And there were a couple others that I wrote in an hour.
I really don't think that you should be admitting that to especially any writers in the room.
My whole thing is, as writers, we're like taught to, we're supposed to revise, we're supposed to. And what if, and I'm saying this to myself, like, wouldn't it be great if just like once a week you could have that gift of like writing something in an hour, and just having it come from your brain and be like perfect. And so for me, it's like once every couple of years, like something like that will happen. For the most part, it's I have some sense of what the story is going to be, some sense of the length, and then after a couple pages, either I know I can do it, or I have a lot of like abandoned, 2-page, I call them stubs. They're just like a folder of stubs, and sometimes I'll go back to them, and that's been fun. Actually, one of the stubs I used in Same Bed, Different Dreams, because I wanted a scene set in 2010, and I was like, oh, I never finished this short story from 2010, and I kind of, built it out or retrofitted it. But well, it's funny you should. So that blurb was from Sarah Manguso.
Yeah.
Have any of you read
Liars?
Manguso, this book, Liars? So I have this
that book.
Yeah, I mean, she started as a poet.
She's at Hogarth, I think.
She's a Hogarth writer.
My publisher,
I was working at the Village Voice many years ago
Yeah.
I guess in the 90s, and I was the deputy copy chief, and I hired her as a freelance copy editor. So I kind of
wow.
like, I knew she was a poet, and her first 2 books are poetry and
Oh, I didn't know that she was a poet. That makes
prose,
sense.
and a lot
Okay.
of them are like prose poems. So I
Oh.
do feel like I kind of learned a lot from
Yeah.
her and poets like her. And you know, I'm sure I have like certain poetic
Yeah.
experiments like that. But I think just carrying that over into short story writing, like
Yeah.
I think there's something, even for the very short stories, like
Yeah.
going through it again
Yeah.
and just taking out the words that don't need to
Yeah.
be there,
Yeah.
and taking out the sentences that don't need to be there can be
Which
really
Yeah, which you
great.
have to do
Which you
if
have to
you're
do.
doing a reading because they give you like
Yes.
these time limits.
Yeah. There are
And
definitely.
most often they're like 8 minutes, and you're like, oh my God,
What am I gonna
it's like
do?
nothing.
I had this bad experience in New York, and I'm never going to do this kind of thing again. They had like in St. Mark's Place, like New Year's Eve, we're going to get like 50 people, like everybody's going to read for
Oh my
like 3 minutes.
God.
And so I wrote this story that was like a touch over, and they cut me off. And I was so
They
furious.
actually cut
Yeah.
you off?
And I was so, and I kind of the story is actually not in the collection, but it was like a legit, like
Yeah.
funny story.
But you didn't get to the last
I
line.
didn't get to the last
with
line,
the
and I
turn
was
that
so
made
bitter.
it a story.
But I think maybe it was this idea of like writing for an event, writing for a reading that
Yeah.
also unconsciously, like I tried to be economical.
Yeah. And
yeah.
also probably funny, right?
Yes,
because
definitely.
you want to make the
Yeah.
audience respond.
Yeah, it was nice hearing you guys laugh at certain points. Because,
Yeah.
so a lot of the, my first experience reading, I noticed, when people laugh, like that's feedback, like that's like there's a
Yes.
certain amount of enjoyment there. So I wonder, even though I've always loved humor in writing, I kind of like, I was a big like Vonnegut reader and people like Douglas Adams
Yeah.
and all sorts of people, and I still love that stuff. P.G. Wodehouse.
Yeah.
I think that kind of background combined with, reading
Yeah.
in public,
Yeah.
perhaps pushed me in the humorous direction.
Do you feel like based on, so if you did a reading
Yeah.
and you wrote up a new piece for that,
Yeah.
and then you got feedback,
Mhm.
does that inform how you revise, whether you revise,
yeah.
and maybe like a story? Do you ever have a thing where like you think, oh, this was great, I really like this, I think this is one of my best stories that I've ever written, and then nobody laughs or nobody responds in some way, and the applause is not like great,
Yeah.
and then you think, oh, well, obviously I was wrong? Does that
that's
inform?
happened. Yes. There's one story in this collection that is now it's longer than what I read. It's called Eat, Pray, Click.
Oh my God, I love this
And
story. I
remember,
love this
it's
story.
kind of about a haunted Kindle.
No, it's actually about AI. I was going to
It's
ask you
actually-
about
well,
it. It's
yes,
about like
it is
it's about a
AI.
Kindle.
Yeah.
When did you write this?
But I wrote this around 2009.
Okay, so
I didn't
way
actually-
before AI.
I didn't even have a Kindle. I just saw a friend had it. I was like, whoa, that's so cool. But then I immediately, the fiction writer part was like, what kind of like dark things could be done with
So
with
it's
this?
like a hacker in this short story in Eat, Pray, Click. A hacker uses the Kindle technology to basically like think through how stories that are real stories or novels can and should be changed to suit whatever reactions the reader is having, which is eerily similar to things that I am afraid might be happening now, right?
Well,
so it was very prescient.
It was prescient, but the original version was too long. So I read it, 2009, let's say, and the first couple pages, like people were on board, and then I was like, I felt like I'm taking too long to get to the concept,
Yeah.
and it like dragged on for like 20 minutes.
Oh
Well,
my
it
God.
felt like 20
20
minutes. Maybe it was like
minutes.
10
Okay.
minutes, but I was like, oh my God, when is this story gonna end? And then about maybe 6 months later, I was invited to do another reading with some writers, and I just like brutally like I was just like, boy, pare it down. And one thing that I do often, and I don't know if it still bears this mark, but I will break a story down into like 10 parts.
Yeah.
I used to do this all the time, and I would number the parts.
Oh.
And my feeling was each part should be short, and you can just like kind of like a prose poem, but
Yeah.
just make it as perfect as you can. Like
Yeah.
make it as funny as you can.
Yeah.
Just like every word should be great.
Yeah.
And it's just a very small canvas. So just do one. And if
Yeah.
you can do that, maybe you can do a second one.
Yeah.
And then I build up a story that way. So I kind
Yeah.
of did that with this Eat, Pray,
Yeah.
Click story and made it a much, much better story, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's
That's
my tip.
great. No,
My
I
tip
love
of the day.
it. But I also think that it's very prescient, and I think that it's uncanny how you wrote that so long ago.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the kind of thing that you and I were talking about
Yeah.
like earlier could be happening right
Could
now.
be happening as we speak
Um,
with my book.
so another thing that I wanted to ask you about was form.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, you know, we talk so much about voice, especially for shorter things,
Mhm.
that, you know, how important that is. And you do definitely have great voices that are very different throughout. But at the same time, I do feel like what distinguishes all of the different stories here is the form that you use, and it's such a huge variety of forms. So like one of the things that I want to talk about is, I mean, you guys read we just heard you do the note to the translator, which is in letter form. There are several other letters.
Yeah.
There's the slide to unlock, which is the New Yorker story, which is like a list of old passwords we think.
Yep.
It's kind of like a second person story. And then this is where I was like, oh my God, I have never seen this before, which is Weird Menace, which is a DVD commentary. And so it's two people, the director and one of the stars,
Yep.
both of whom basically can't remember the sci-fi movie that they were in, that she was in, and that he directed, or that, no, they're both women.
He's a there's a male director.
Yeah, there's a male director.
And it's many years later. Yeah.
The movie is from like the 80s.
Yeah.
And they're doing this DVD commentary. And I do love these directors' commentaries. And I've sat through many of them. And I love those. And you see these two columns. And you wrote it originally as an Audible original?
I actually wrote it as a story originally.
You did?
And
Okay.
then a former student of mine was at Audible. He's like, do you have any stories that we could do? And I thought of this story, which was kind of unpublishable in that form because it's quite long, and it's broken up into two columns. So like the left channel and the right channel for the different voices.
And also what I love is the white space.
There's a lot of white space.
It makes such good use of the white space. So you can see like somebody says something and then there's so much white space.
Like,
so you know that like they're just like, oh, okay, that was a little awkward. Let's just like not say anything for 2 more minutes, you know, that kind of thing. And so I love that.
Yeah, thank you. I have a soft spot for that. You know, that the actress in that story, Weird Menace, she appears in another story as she owns a steakhouse. She's like long retired.
Yes.
And then she's also in like these unpublished stories of mine. So it kind of like came with a lot of like backstory. But then the pleasure, so I'll just say I had been watching, this was like the last days of Netflix, I guess, but I would just like rent whatever looked kind of interesting. And there was a movie, I think it was from the 70s, called Trilogy of Terror. Has anyone seen this?
No.
Karen Black was in it, and she was doing the commentary. And I just thought, I mean, it was better than the movie. Like, I just thought she was so like entertaining. And I can't remember if the director was there too. I think it was just her. And I think that maybe put the idea in my head.
Yeah.
And then I thought, how would I represent that visually on the page?
Right.
And then what would the story be? Like, you can't just be, she was just entertaining, Karen Black was just entertaining on this commentary, but like, in order to be a story, like what are they misremembering?
Yes.
What will they discover?
Yeah.
So it became a lot of fun because I could just, part of it was them just commenting on like, oh, I remember that actor. I
Yes.
remember this special effects thing. And then
And they also don't remember anything that happened.
Which happens to me a lot these days. But, you know,
exactly.
there's that idea of like, maybe the two of them can kind of figure it out. Like,
Yeah.
This person, you know, they try to pick up at least one germane fact about, you know, this bit player, I guess.
And I think it's also the Weird Menace also picks up on something that you do a lot throughout all of these stories, which is, you know, think about the past and think about history and think about memory and have somebody external to the people in the story who are trying to force like some kind of sort of discipline on them. And, you know, and them actually like trying to remember something that happened. And I think that what's funny is that there's so much like sci-fi, you know, movies and fun things like that going on. But really at the heart of it, to me, there's so much nostalgia.
Yeah.
And so much remembering and sort of longing back.
Yeah. I mean, even Blu-rays and DVDs are kind of like nostalgia at this point.
Yeah.
Like, and every technology kind of becomes, we grow fond of it, even if we had issues with it at the time. So there, you know, one thing about revising the story is like there's a story where Facebook is used a lot, and I haven't been on Facebook in many, many years, but when I was collecting it, like the tone fits the rest of the stories. This is a story called Bring on the Dancing Horses. And I was like, should I change Facebook? But no, it like it's a marker for that point in time.
Right.
Or like Weird Menace is, you know, Blu-ray commentary, but it's also kind of bad science fiction movies of the 80s, of which I know quite a bit. So it's like kind of double nostalgia for me.
Right.
And not that I just sit around like thinking about the past, but there is sort of that. I mean, you come across the name of a band, you hear a song by a band you haven't heard in a while, and suddenly you're 14 again or whatever age, and it's just
Echo and the Bunnymen.
Echo and the Bunnymen, yes. Bring on the Dancing Horses, like that. There was something about their name and that song, but also I was remembering like this is back in the 80s where I had seen their name like graffitied on a building. In the suburbs where there wasn't a lot of graffiti, and I must have been like 11 or something. I was like, what is Echo and the Bunnymen?
Yeah.
And I didn't know, and eventually I learned it was a group, but you couldn't like look stuff up then. And so it was like 4 years before I like actually heard them.
Yeah.
But I was like ready to like them. I was like, oh my God, at last.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's
okay, so I'm gonna invite anybody who wants to ask a question to come up to the mic that's right there. And while people are doing that and thinking of questions to ask, I have like 4,000 more.
Oh yeah.
So I will go on with one more, but please, like, don't be shy. Come on up. So while that's happening, actually, let's actually stick to that particular thing of, you know, the nostalgia and remembering back. Machine City, which is one of my favorite stories. In fact, I think after I finished reading it, I think I texted you and I was like, is this you? Is this because the narrator is named Ed, went to Yale.
Yes.
Has a middle name named June.
Yeah.
And so I think I texted you. I think that's all I asked. I said, is your middle name June?
You did ask that.
And you were like, yes. Why are you asking? and I was like, because I'm trying to figure out whether this is autobiographical.
The only autobiographical thing about it. So that's another function of like getting older is like, I never really wrote like a college type of story until I was, 50 something, right? Like I didn't have that distance, but it was sort of I'll say the one thing that's autobiographical is I looked at I saw a reflection of myself and was like, wow, it wasn't just that I looked older, like this is like, let's say 2020, 2021,
Yeah.
but it kind of looked like I was also like a character who was being made up to look older.
Yeah.
And then I was like, wait a second, what if, well, anyway, I remembered that I'm not an actor, but I was in a student film.
Which is exactly what Ed, the characters,
yeah. And so that was the
happens
idea.
to
So like,
Ed,
what
yeah.
if like a non-actor just kind of bumbling around is like put into a student film? And
Yeah.
so the rest of it is made up. But then I think just to, I don't know, maybe to express some kind of secret connection, or not so secret, I gave him the name Ed.
Yeah.
Also,
and the middle name June.
Yeah, I guess. Do I call? I don't give him the last name though. I don't think so.
You might have said
Do
Kim.
I slip it
I
in?
think
Yeah,
it-
that was
I
the
think it
fiction
was
part. I was
Kim,
like, Ed Kim.
because the ex-girlfriend is also Kim, I
Oh.
think, but her parents didn't like Ed
That's
because they're from
Did
different.
they have the same last name?
Yes, I think so, but I think they're from different. What's
I
it
wrote this
called?
also before I knew you.
Oh,
so
okay. No, it's okay.
offense.
No,
I like-
there were
I
many,
like
many
Kims.
Kims. No, there were many, many
yeah.
Kims. I wouldn't even, think no. But very, very funny. I love that, and because there's a lot of stuff about films and acting.
Yeah,
And
I think I was
things
also
like
trying
that.
to think about like this was like late 80s, early 90s, and like
Yeah.
what it meant to be Asian in college, or specifically Korean.
Well, okay,
And maybe I didn't have enough distance
So
until
I was gonna.
I was 15.
So I actually do have this question. Given that I'm Korean American, I do have to ask you. And
no.
seriously, people start coming up. But one thing that I noticed in the reviews of
Yeah.
your book, and in like interviews and things like that for this particular book, is that there's really there are characters who
Yeah.
are Korean American,
Yeah.
who are Asian, and yet like the reviews don't really talk about that aspect of it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed that at all.
I noticed that too.
I thought it was interesting. Like I wondered what that was about. Do you feel like that's in any way a part of sort of, the sensibility of this book or what you were trying to accomplish, or is it not? And maybe that's what the reviewers were picking up on. Like, what did you make of that?
Well, so by my count, I think there are so Machine City. There's a story called Seven Women, and a story
Which
called
has many.
which has
Yeah.
there's many kind of Asian.
Yeah.
And the narrator of that reappears in a story called Watch Your Step, which is actually set
Yeah.
in Seoul.
In Seoul.
in the 90s.
Yeah.
But aside from that, generally the race is not defined. But
Right.
my thinking was that since so many of these stories were written to be read,
Yeah.
I was like, they can see that I'm Asian
Yeah.
or Korean.
Yeah.
And so they can like,
Oh, yeah.
or maybe it was just like, I don't have to put that in there because I
Yeah.
am reading it. It's sort of occurring to me now as we're talking, because
Yeah.
there's something like, I'll also say like often I was the only Asian person,
Yeah,
reading,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I didn't make too big a deal of it. Like, I was just happy to be reading.
Yeah.
But I wonder if what you're talking about is sort of a function of like, I'm going to go out there in public.
Right.
People can see who I am. This is a story I'm reading. And, often they're in the first person. So perhaps they will
Yeah.
associate it with me.
I also thought, but I mean, at the same time, there was a part of me that was like, you know what? I kind of like that people aren't focusing on it. They're not
Yeah.
like, sometimes books and narratives, I think, can get nit like a
Yeah.
little bit ghettoized in some ways, and
Yeah.
and so so anyway, so I thought that was interesting. Okay,
Yeah,
we
that
have
makes
some
sense.
questions.
Oh,
Ah.
hey.
Yay!
Hey,
Hi.
sorry to
Hi,
interrupt. You guys are having such a good
Hi.
conversation.
Hi.
Good to
And
see you.
I actually, you're funny on the page, Ed, but I think you're funny in
Oh my
person
God,
too.
thank you so much. My ideal reader has arrived.
Thank you. I was wondering whether you had actually had a conversation with your translator when you were having Same Bed, Different Dreams translated, and whether you thought, oh, this is funny. I wrote a story about this 20 years ago.
Yes, Same Bed, Different Dreams recently translated into French. I think it comes out next year. I have like high school level French, and this guy Stefan, who lives, he lives in France, and it was a lot. It was a lot of fun actually, because the Same Bed. There are a lot of words and things like names and things that are puns, and one of the tricky things about Same Bed is that I'm often using English word for a Korean word. So then how do you can you triple it? Can you triple stack it? And I think it's kind of impossible. I remember, I think in Pale Fire, Nabokov says it's like Korova, Kosova, Corona. Like there's one word that you can do it in 3 languages, like English, Russian, and French maybe. Like the same play can happen, but often for Same Bed with the French translator, we kind of he would come up with ingenious names that were more sometimes almost more Vietnamese sounding, and I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I want to do it, but I think it has to be Korean. So sometimes we would have to cut back and just lose the pun. But
so you lost the pun?
Well, some of the things, but overall, I mean, a small percentage for my French fans.
But we were talking about the Korean translation, which doesn't exist, and now I'm wondering if maybe that's one of the issues is that when the editors over there are reading, they're like, well, this doesn't we have to lose a lot of these.
I think some of the energy of the plot comes from the revelation that a certain word that's being used, but in English actually, a couple points that happen. So maybe it's not that the Koreans don't like me; it's that
because seriously, we were sitting next door, and we were having martinis, and we were going why would the Koreans not want this? They're so into Pulitzers, and I think we solved. Thank you for that. That's amazing. I love this.
Well, there is something about a simple pared down style. Maybe that would translate, but I don't.
Okay. All right. Yes.
I know hi there. We were chatting about how different names appear throughout the book. There's Hansi Krop, and people get kind of morphed into different forms throughout the book. And I was thinking about how that's kind of like dreams. Like, it was my daughter, but I was using my sister's name.
Oh, wow.
And your book reminded me a little bit of Lori Moore's Anagrams.
Oh my God.
Characters with the same name, but it's like the sister.
I haven't thought about that book in a while, but that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious if you were thinking about anything dreamlike in this one. I know technology is a big theme. I didn't know if something like that was on your mind.
I feel like I'm always thinking about dreams, and sometimes actually I've gotten stories out of dreams, and actually what I'm working on now, the novel I'm working on now, I'm in this section that I woke up from a dream and I was like, I got to write it down, and then I'm like, it's got to be part of the novel, and now I've been working on it for 8 months, and it's all from this one dream. So I do think there's something about dream structure that I try to embrace or capture. But that's really cool about the names. I think in this book I'm trying to make it you can read any story out of sequence and just enjoy it, but there are certain names, the Tinas being one. Yeah. There's also a woman named Hannah Hahn, which I kept using as a placeholder. Not a placeholder, but when I would write these stories, 5 years might pass, I'll write another story, and I don't even really remember the other story she was in. And then when I was gathering them together, I was like, she keeps coming up. It must be the same person. So maybe that's dreamlike too, because I just sort of went to that name because I liked how it sounded. And then
it's also a very Korean American, because Hana is number one in Korean.
Oh, that's right.
But because it's also an American name, I feel like there are certain names like that, like Eugene for boys.
Eugene, my good friend Eugene.
It's so much. Half of my cousins are named Eugene, and Hannah is a very Korean American woman name, because of that.
It is. Well, so Eugene, I was just texting. I honestly have a friend named Eugene who grew up in this area, and he is in. So when we were in college, he was. Anyway, his name was Eugene Cho, so it's E. Cho, which is Echo, which is why the character in Same Bed Different Dreams is named Echo. He's actually Eugene Cho in the book, but also in real life, he's my buddy.
Oh my God.
I will also say at my last reading there were like 5 Hannahs in the audience.
Yeah,
so
of course,
not all
right?
Korean,
Yes.
yeah. So, thank you. That's a great question. Hi.
Hi. I have 2 quick questions. My first question is how much time you spend reading?
Yeah.
Sort of like a consumption to production ratio as a writer.
Yeah.
And my second question is if somebody is interested in possibly starting to write a short story, are there any pitfalls of the genre that you've identified over the past 20 years?
Oh my God, I love that question.
To young writers.
Okay. Pitfalls of like the entire short story genre?
Like what not to do.
What not to do. Okay, and repeat very quickly the first question.
How much time do you spend reading?
How much time do I spend reading?
The reading, the consumption to output.
I feel like those questions are kind of connected because I suppose I have been reading a lot of short stories in the past several years, and maybe it's sort of knowing that this book was coming out. I like everyone, like online stuff is a distraction, but I do try to not do that, and I try to have some reading every day. There's a quote. Without reading every day, there's a quote in Same Bed Different Dreams that one of the characters said. Without reading every day, like nettles grow in the mouth, or something like that. I don't know. It's probably like a Confucian thing. So I try to actually keep a list of books, but there was a time where I stopped working in my day job, and suddenly I had like all these novels. I was like reading all these novels, and then as like more things happened with my writing and so forth, instead of like listing the novels that I was reading, it was just like essays, like articles I was reading. But I do feel like you know even a short story can like have a profound effect on how you think about writing. I guess as the second question, pitfalls in the genre. I just think everybody has their own taste, and I feel like I guess I always love to be proven wrong. Or so, I mean, this is maybe not a super smart example, but like I'd read John Cheever before, and and like some stories, but I didn't do like a concentrated. Well, anyway, a friend gave me the collected stories, or the from about four years ago maybe. And I was just like, wow, I missed so much. He's not kind of what I thought he was. He's not just like, Westchester's suburban ennui. And it's just like, these are like dreams. These are the best ones, I think, just take you in a completely, they feel like compressed novels. Yeah. And then the language, which, I knew was good, is like transcendently great. So, I mean, that feels like, I wouldn't say Cheever was a pitfall, but it's like I kind of have embraced that. Like I just feel like he is, he's the greatest. Yeah. But somebody I had maybe dismissed a little prematurely.
Is there, because you're working on both short stories and novel. Yeah. Is there one or the are there differences that you can talk about in your process, or one that you I'm sure that they're different, but one that you feel more comfortable with, or anything like that? And then I think we're gonna have to wrap up.
Okay, well, yes, I'll just say, like, with a novel, I feel like I've always been working on a novel since my 20s, even novels that have never been published. And the good thing about short stories, like, it felt like a bit liberating, right? Yeah. Like I was playing hooky from writing the novel, especially back then, like writing novels that nobody actually wanted, and then versus writing stories that people laughed, and like it was sort of like It was good. It was just like good for me in so many ways. Like I think it made me a sharper writer, but it gave me some confidence in myself. And especially when some of the stories started getting published, I was like, oh, okay, maybe somebody will want will want a novel someday. And you know, it's a long process, but I feel like I need both in my life. And I'm working on a novel now, but I still have these story ideas that I know don't belong in the novel. And so I've got to just do them in the short form.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming to
Angie.
DC and for being
so great
here.
To be here.
We're so excited. And we're so excited for the memoir that's coming out next year. Everybody
we haven't even talked about it. But
we haven't even talked about it, but he has a memoir coming out next year. So definitely
I'll come back. We'll talk.
Yeah, we'll definitely. Okay, thank you so much.
Everyone.
And please support Politics and Prose by, you know, buying not only an Oral History of Atlantis, but Same Bed, Different Dreams, Personal Days, all there at the cash register. Thank you so much.
Everyone.
Okay, and he'll be here to sign.
Yep.
Okay. Do you
Also,
have any?
no. Yep. It's